My brother's voice cracked a little when he said it, the way it used to when we were kids, and he was telling me something he knew I was not going to want to hear. He said, "Mom told us you were impossible to live with. That's why they came back home." I was standing at my kitchen counter. It was 11 at night, and I had a coffee mug in my hand, and the rest of the house was quiet. Across the open-plan living room, the guest suite door was closed, the way it always was by 9. I had renovated that suite 2 years before my parents moved in. New bathroom, proper closet, a separate entrance, so they would have their own space and not feel like guests. I had been proud of that. I had thought it showed them something about how I felt about having them there. I said, "Say that again." He said it again. Then he said, "She's been saying it for years, man. I thought you knew." I set the mug down on the counter. I thought about the 5 years of grocery runs and prescription pickups, and the rent I had never once collected, and the dinner I had made them 3 hours ago and carried to that door because my father's knees had been bad that week. I thought about all of it in about 4 seconds, and then I stopped thinking about it. I said, "Thanks for telling me," and I ended the call. I did not move from that counter for a long time. The suite door stayed closed. The house stayed quiet, and I stood there in my own kitchen at 11 o'clock at night, trying to figure out how long I had been the subject of a story I had never been told. I did the grocery run on Saturday morning the way I did most Saturday mornings. 2 carts, one for my parents' list and one for mine, moving through the aisles in a specific order because I had done it enough times that I had the store memorized. Their list always had more on it than mine. Different milk, specific bread, the low-sodium crackers my father liked, the herbal tea my mother ordered online until she discovered I could just pick it up. I did not mind any of it. That was the honest truth. I had offered to do it, and I kept doing it because it made sense and because it was easy for me in a way it was not easy for them anymore. Back at the house, I unloaded everything into the kitchen while my father watched golf in the den and my mother stayed in the guest suite. I could hear the television from down the hall and the occasional sound of a page turning. Neither one came out to help carry bags. I put the oat milk on the second shelf where my mother preferred it, stacked the crackers in the pantry where my father could reach them without bending, and broke down the paper bags and put them in the recycling. Then I drove back to the pharmacy because I had forgotten their prescriptions and the pharmacist was only open until noon on Saturdays. I knocked on the guest suite door when I got back. My mother's voice said, "Come in." She was on the phone, sitting in the chair by the window, and when she saw me, she said into the receiver, "I'll call you back, honey," and smiled at me the way she always smiled. Warm, easy, like I had done something thoughtful just by existing in the doorway. I set the pharmacy bag on the dresser. She thanked me. I told her the antihistamines were in there too. She thanked me again. I pulled the door, closed behind me, and I was halfway down the hall before I registered it. The call timer on her screen had still been running when I walked out. She had not hung up. She had just lowered the phone to her lap and waited for me to leave. I filed it as nothing. People do that. You say you'll call someone back, and then you just pick the call back up. It did not mean anything. That evening I made salmon and rice and the green beans my father's bridge could handle without giving him trouble. We sat at the table, the 3 of us, and ate together, which was something I had genuinely wanted when I offered them the suite. A house with people in it, meals shared, some version of family that felt functional and close. My mother mentioned partway through dinner that my sister's birthday was coming up. She said, "Your sister wants that bag, the one she sent me a picture of. You know how she is. We can't really swing it right now." I said, "Send me the link." She reached across and touched my hand. She said, "You're so good to us, David. I don't know what we'd do." I cleared the plates while my parents moved to the den. My father settled into his chair, and my mother found her program, and I stood at the sink running water over the dishes, and the house felt full and settled and fine. That was what it felt like from where I was standing. Full and settled and fine. Tuesday afternoon, I was at my desk running through a deployment issue when my mother knocked on the office door. She had the heating bill printed out, which she only did when she wanted to make the number feel more real by handing it to someone. She said the bill seemed high, and could I take a look? I pulled it up on my screen. The guest suite thermostat had been running at 74 degrees since October, which was why the bill was high. I did not say that. I said I would handle it, and she thanked me and left the door slightly open behind her the way she sometimes did, and I went back to my screen. I heard her voice in the hallway a minute later, low and easy, the way she talked on the phone when she did not think the conversation was relevant to anyone nearby. She said, "He's fine. He's working. You know how he gets." I kept typing. I did not know what she meant by that. I told myself it could mean anything and went back to the deployment. Friday night, my older sister Megan stopped by. Megan, 39, lives 20 minutes away, the kind of person who treats every room she enters like she already knows where everything is, knocked twice and walked in before I finished opening the door. She said, "Hey, David," and went straight down the hall toward the guest suite without taking her shoes off. I heard my mother's voice drop to that softer pitch it found when she was talking to someone she did not need to manage. 20 minutes later, Megan came back down the hall, carrying a department store bag I had never seen before. She said, "Thanks, see you," and walked out. I stood in my own entryway for a moment after the door closed. I had paid for my sister's birthday gift, apparently, and had been the last person in the house to know it was here. I went back to loading the dishwasher and did not bring it up. Later that night, my father wandered into the kitchen for water. Raymond, late 60s, retired, a man who chose his words carefully because he did not use many of them, stopped by the counter and watched me load the bottom rack for a moment without saying anything. Then he said, "You know your mother appreciates you." I said, "Yeah, Dad." He put his hand on my shoulder briefly. He said, "I just wanted to say it." Then he took his glass of water and walked back to the den. I stood there with a wet plate in my hand and thought about the specific way he had said it. Not casually, not in passing. He had stopped and waited and delivered it like something he had been carrying around and needed to set down somewhere. Like a man making a small correction to a record he was not sure anyone else was keeping. I did not call my mother the morning after Eli's call. I did not bring it up at breakfast or mention it over the grocery run or say anything at dinner. I drove to a coffee shop 20 minutes from the house on a Wednesday afternoon, and I texted Eli the address, and I sat in a booth facing the door and waited. He arrived looking like he had not slept. Eli, late 20s, the youngest of us, the one who had always been better at feeling things than the rest of the family, slid into the booth across from me and put both hands around his coffee cup and did not quite meet my eyes at first. I told him to start from the beginning. He did. He said our mother had been telling people for at least 3 years, aunts, cousins, Meg and him, that I was controlling, that I was particular about the house, that I was honestly difficult to live with, but they were managing. He said he had believed it for a long time because there was no reason not to. She said it the way she said everything, calmly and with a kind of tired affection, like she was reporting a fact about someone she loved anyway despite the difficulty. She said, "You made them feel like guests in their own home." She said it at Megan's barbecue. Aunt Carol asked me about it last Christmas. I told her you were just busy. "I'm sorry, man. I should have said something then." I said, "How long?" He said, 3 years, easy. Maybe 4. I asked about Megan. He looked at the table. He said Megan had been the loudest about it. Megan was telling people I charged our parents to live there. Megan was telling people I made them eat on a schedule. Megan was telling people I would not let our mother decorate the suite. I thought about the department store bag Megan had walked out of my house with. I thought about every birthday gift I had funded without being asked directly, just nudged toward through a mention at dinner. I did not say any of that out loud. Eli said he was sorry again. I told him he had nothing to be sorry for. I drove home, and my mother was in the kitchen making tea when I came in. She looked up and smiled and asked how my day was. I said fine. She asked if I wanted a cup. I said no thanks and walked past her in my office and closed the door. 10 minutes later, she knocked. She asked if everything was okay. I said, "Just tired." She said, "Okay, sweetheart," and her footsteps went back down the hall. I sat at my desk in the dark with the monitor off and thought about a story that had been traveling through my family for 3 or 4 years, passing from my mother's mouth to aunts and cousins and siblings, landing and settling and becoming the version of me that people believed. And I've been in the house the whole time, cooking dinner, picking up prescriptions, putting the oat milk on the second shelf, completely unaware that any of it was happening. My Aunt Carol called on Sunday afternoon. She opened with the usual, "How was work? How was I keeping?" and then settled into the real reason about 3 minutes in the way she always did, like she was arriving somewhere she had been heading the whole time. She asked how things were with my parents. "Really?" I said things were fine. She said, "You know your mother just wants peace, David. We all just want peace for her." I asked what she meant by that. She backpedaled immediately. "Oh, nothing, just, you have your ways." She laughed a little to soften it. I said I was not sure what way she meant. She changed the subject to my cousin's new job, and we were off the topic before I could find a way back to it. She said before she hung up, "Your mother is so patient, David. Not everyone could do what she does. You should call her more, even when you're stressed. It would mean a lot." I said, "I live with her, Aunt Carol." There was a long pause. She said, "Right? Of course." We got off the phone, and I sat with what had just happened. She had called me to manage me. Someone had told her a version of this situation, and she had believed it completely and picked up the phone to smooth things over on my mother's behalf, not knowing she was calling the wrong person in the wrong direction. Monday morning, my cousin sent me a screenshot. There was a family group chat I was not in. My mother had written, "Pray for us. Living here has not been easy, but we're trying to keep the peace for him." My cousin had typed underneath it, "I didn't know it was like that. You okay?" I stared at my phone for a long time. I did not answer. Tuesday evening, my mother came into the kitchen while I was making dinner and asked in that soft, easy way she had whether Megan and the kids could come over Sunday. She said it would be so nice. I said yes. She kissed the top of my head on her way out of the kitchen. I stood at the stove with the spatula in my hand and felt something shift in my chest, not dramatically, not all at once, just a slow movement from one temperature to another. I turned off the burner. I looked at the pan. I put the spatula down and went to my desk and ordered takeout and ate it alone with the door closed. The story had already traveled further than I could reach. It was not something my mother had said once in a bad moment. It was the frame through which my aunt, my cousins, my sister, and apparently a group chat I did not know existed all understood who I was and what was happening in this house. Confronting my mother would not undo any of that. The people who had heard it had already decided. They had already adjusted how they saw me, and they were not going to unadjust based on my version of events because they had never once been given reason to question hers. I sat at my desk and ate my takeout and thought about 5 years of groceries and prescriptions and renovated bathrooms and rent never collected and dinners cooked and birthday gifts paid for, and how none of it had made into the story that was being told about me. I woke up at 2 in the morning and lay there for a while before I gave up on sleep and got up. I walked through the house without turning on any lights. I knew the layout well enough. 3 years before my parents moved, and I had walked these same rooms deciding where everything would go, what would stay, what the house could be. I stopped outside the guest suite door. I could hear my father snoring on the other side of it, low and steady. I put my hand on the door frame and stood there in the dark. It would be easy to do nothing. That was the thing I kept returning to. I could go back to bed and wake up in the morning and make coffee and do the grocery run Saturday and cook dinner Sunday when Megan and the kids came over, and life would continue in the shape it had been in for 5 years. My mother would keep telling her story to whoever was listening, and I would keep being the man who did not know it was being told, and that version of things would hold together as long as I let it. I went back to bed. I did not sleep. At breakfast Thursday, my mother asked if I could drive her to a doctor's appointment Friday. I said yes before I had finished processing the question. Then I heard myself say it. I put my coffee cup down and looked at it for a moment. She had already moved on to telling me what she wanted for lunch. I drove her Friday. In the waiting room, she patted my knee and turned to the receptionist at the desk and said, "This is my son. He takes such good care of us. We're so blessed." The receptionist smiled at me. I smiled back. I held that smile in place and thought about the phone call she would probably make within the hour and how the same sentence would sound completely different by the time it reached whoever was on the other end of it. Friday night, Eli called. He said Megan had just told him their mother was looking at apartments because the situation at my place was getting harder. I laughed once, short and sharp and completely without humor. I thanked Eli and hung up and sat on the edge of my bed in the quiet house and understood something I had been circling for days without landing on directly. My silence was not neutral. It was not patience or restraint or the high road. My silence was the raw material my mother was using to build the story. Every dinner I cooked without saying anything, every prescription I picked up, every yes I said automatically before I had time to think, all of it was being fed into a version of events where I was the difficult one and she was the one enduring it. As long as I said nothing, she got to keep writing me. I sat there on the edge of the bed for a long time. Then I opened my laptop. Saturday morning, I opened my laptop and drafted a formal 30-day move-out notice. I kept it short. Names, address, date, signature line. No explanation. No history. Just the facts. I printed 2 copies and put them in a plain folder in my desk drawer. I did not tell anyone. I spent the rest of the morning answering work emails like it was an ordinary day. Saturday afternoon, I called Eli. I asked him to come to dinner Sunday night with our parents. Just the 4 of us. He asked why. I said because I needed a witness who was already on the record. He was quiet for a second. Then he said okay. He would be there. Sunday afternoon, my mother was humming in the kitchen prepping for Megan's family to come over the following weekend. She asked me to grab the good plates from the high cabinet. I grabbed them. I set them on the counter. She thanked me and patted my arm. I looked at her and almost said it. The words were right there. I did not. I went upstairs and confirmed the folder was in my drawer. I waited. Eli called me later that afternoon. He asked if I was kicking them out. I said I was giving them notice. He said Mom was going to make this my fault. I said she already had. That was why I needed him in the room. He was quiet again. Then he said he would be there. 6 o'clock. He would not leave early. I put the phone down. The folder was in my drawer. The dinner was in a few hours. Eli would be there. I had never needed backup at my own dinner table before. That told me something about what this Sunday was about to become. I'm over at where silence ends. Subscribe if any of this sounds familiar. I went downstairs. My mother was still humming. The good plates were on the counter. The house looked the way it had looked for 5 years. Nothing had changed yet. Everything was about to. I sat on the couch and waited for 6 o'clock. My father was napping in the guest suite. My mother was in the kitchen. I was in the living room. 3 people in a house that was about to get very quiet. I waited. The clock moved. The doorbell would ring soon. Eli would walk in. Then we would eat. Then I would speak. I had been silent for 5 years. I was done. I waited. Sunday evening, the 4 of us sat at the dining table. I served pasta. Simple, unceremonial. Eli was across from me. My parents were at the heads. Halfway through the meal, I set down my fork and said I needed to talk to them about something. My mother smiled and said, "Of course, sweetheart." My father stopped chewing. The room went still. I told them what Eli had told me. I used his name. Eli nodded once when my mother looked at him. I listed what I heard. Difficult to live with. Controlling. The family group chat. Aunt Carol's call. The apartment story Megan was now spreading. My mother's face moved through 3 expressions in 5 seconds. She landed on hurt. She said I must have misunderstood. She said Eli must have misunderstood. Eli said quietly that he did not. I opened the folder. I slid 1 copy of the move-out notice across the table to my mother and 1 to my father. 30 days. I said I was not angry. I said I was done being the character in a story I never agreed to be in. My mother started to cry. My father read the paper, folded it carefully, and set it down without looking at her. My mother said she never said those things. Whoever told me that was lying to me. Eli said, "Mom, I'm sitting right here." She turned to him and said he knew how things got twisted. I told her to stop. Just stop. I said I heard the words. I was not asking her to admit them. I was telling her what happened next. My father finally spoke. He said her name. Linda. He said he heard her. I heard her. Stop. She went silent for the first time all night. The table was quiet. The pasta was still on the plates. No one was eating. My mother looked at my father. He would not look at her. Eli looked at me. I looked at the folder. The other copy sat in front of my father. He had not folded it again. He had just set it down. The 30 days had started. I did not know what they would bring. But my father had spoken. That was new. That was something. I picked up my fork. I took a bite. The food was cold. I did not care. The silence was better than the story. I had finally stopped being the character. Now I just had to wait and see who else would stop performing. The clock ticked. The dinner ended. Eli helped me clear the plates. My mother sat at the table. My father went to the guest suite. He did not close the door. That was new too. I loaded the dishwasher. Eli stood next to me. He did not say anything. He did not need to. He had stayed. That was enough. That was everything for now. Monday morning, Megan called me screaming. She called me a monster. She called me ungrateful. She said I was throwing our elderly parents into the street. I let her finish. I said, ask Eli what happened at dinner. I hung up. She called back twice. I did not pick up. By that evening, Eli texted me. Megan called me. I told her everything. She is not speaking to me now either. Wednesday, my father knocked on my office door. He came in and sat in the chair across from me for the first time in 5 years. He said he was sorry. He said he heard her on the phone more than once and never said anything. Specifically the night I brought home the heating bill. She told her sister I was impossible. He did not say anything. He should have. He said he was a coward. He said he had already started looking at a place. A small condo. Just the two of them. Near his old shop. He said my mother would adjust. I nodded. I did not say it was okay, because it was not. He stood up and left the door open behind him as he went. Day 28, I helped load my parents' boxes into a rented truck. My mother did not speak to me the entire morning. My father shook my hand at the door and said he would call me next week. The truck pulled out of the driveway. I stood in the entryway looking at the empty guest suite. The suite I renovated. The carpet I picked. The closet system I installed. I closed the door for the first time in 5 years with no one behind it. The house was quiet. Not the quiet of waiting. The quiet of absence. I walked through the rooms. The kitchen where she hummed. The living room where he napped. The guest suite where they had lived for 5 years without ever really living with me. The door stayed closed. I left it that way. I went to my office. I sat in my chair. My phone did not ring. Megan was still not speaking to me. My mother was in a truck driving to a condo she did not want. My father had apologized. Eli had stayed. The truth had cost me some things. It had given me others. I sat there counting them. The list was not even, but it was mine. 6 weeks after the move, I was sitting on my back patio on a Saturday morning with a coffee. The sun was up. The yard was quiet. My phone rang. It was my father. I answered. He said he was at the hardware store and wanted to know what brand of caulk I used in the guest suite bathroom because the new place needed some work. I told him. He said thanks. There was a pause. Then he said, your mother asked me to ask you to come for dinner next month. I asked if he was asking or if she was. He said, I am asking. I said, then I will come. He said, okay. He would tell her. I said, tell her what you want, Dad. He went quiet. Then he said goodbye. I said goodbye. He hung up. I sat with the phone in my hand. That conversation, 5 sentences long, no performance in any of them, was the first honest call I had had with anyone in my family in years. No agenda. No manipulation. Just my father at a hardware store asking about caulk, and then asking about dinner. He said, I'm asking. Not she wants to see you. Now you should come. I am asking. That was different. That was him, not her. I did not know if he would keep being that person, but he had been him for 5 sentences. That was something. I set the phone face down on the table. I picked up my coffee. The guest suite door was visible through the kitchen window behind me. It was open, not closed anymore. I had opened it one morning the week before and just left it that way. It was empty, full of nothing but morning light. The carpet was still there. The closet system I installed was still there. But no one was sleeping in it. No one was telling stories about me from behind that door. It was just a room again. That was what I had wanted. Not revenge. Not an apology. Just a room. Just the truth. Just a father who could say, I'm asking and mean it. I drank my coffee. The morning was quiet. The door was open. The phone did not ring again. I sat there for a long time, not waiting, just sitting. The sun got higher. The coffee got cold. I did not care. The quiet was different now. It was not the quiet of holding something in. It was the quiet of having put it down. The guest suite was empty. The story my mother told was still out there somewhere. But I was not in it anymore. I had written myself out, not with a speech, with a 30-day notice, with a closed door that became an open one, with a phone call that lasted 5 sentences and changed everything. Not because my father said anything grand, because he said I am asking. That was enough. That was everything. I finished my coffee. I went inside. I walked past the guest suite. The light was coming through the window. The room was ready for something new. I did not know what yet. I did not need to know today. Today I just let be empty. That was the gift of the truth. Not answers. Space. Space to breathe. Space to decide. Space to leave the door open and see who walks in. Not who performs. Who walks in. I was ready. Finally ready. To see who would come and who would not. Either way, the door was open. That was the only promise I could make. The only one I needed to keep. I kept it. The door stayed open. The morning stayed quiet. I stayed. That was enough. That was everything. I'm over it where silence ends. What door in your life are you finally ready to leave open after years of keeping it closed?